Good morning. My name is Kurt Emanuel. I am the Purdue University Extension Educator for Agricultural and Natural Resources in Boone County, Indiana. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to take a soil sample so that you can get your really property. I'm going to do this for lawns, but really any part of your property where you want to get your soils tested. So this is how to pull a sample, and I'll discuss a few concepts related to that. Okay, today is August 17th, and the reason I'm doing this now is because, contrary to what many people believe, the most important time for lawn fertilization is not in the spring, but actually in the fall. And this can be a fooler because in the spring, of course, we apply nitrogen or apply fertilizer. We get a very immediate response in our turf. It greens up, it grows, it looks great. But the fall fertilizations, when grass is maybe not showing so much vegetative growth, it's actually important for building the root system and the root reserves for your turf going into the following growing season. And actually, by applying what we consider two fall fertilization applications, or more properly, one late summer and one fall, we can actually build that root structure and give that turf a really good head start towards getting started the following spring. So in general, what we recommend from Purdue are two fall lawn fertilizations, one from mid-August through mid-September, and the other one later, very late sometimes, second half of October, even into November. One of the keys to having a good fertilizer program is knowing what your soil's fertility is right now. So we actually recommend that you do a soil test, even if there's nothing particularly wrong with any part of your property. We recommend doing a soil test about every 4 years. If you happen to have an issue you're really working on intensely to try to take care of, then maybe doing that more frequently is in order, but usually about every 4 years we recommend doing a soil test. So why do we do this? Well, we don't do this for nitrogen because nitrogen is ephemeral. I mean, it moves. We have to reapply it every year. We really do this for other nutrients like phosphorus and potassium, things that stay in the soil, build in the soil. I'd be able to see what kinds of nutrients we need to encourage. I'm talking turf here today, but encourage anything. Landscape plants, it can be vegetable garden. If you happen to be a farmer watching this, you're well aware that we do this for corn, soybeans, pasture, hay, those kinds of things as well. So our end result is we will send our soil sample in to a lab, and we will get something that looks like this, which is a soil test result. We'll read some literature that basically says that in Indiana soils you should not need to apply phosphorus or potassium to encourage good lawn growth. I would say that is true if you are dealing with a native Indiana soil. Many of our homes are new construction, and many of them have a situation where we have subsoil that is now serving as topsoil. I would say in that situation, you may not know what is in your soil, and you should certainly be testing for phosphorus and potassium. Okay, as with most things, the actual soil testing takes less time than the planning for it. I'm going to discuss something called management zones when we're talking soil testing. Those of you who own property know that every piece of your property is not identical. You don't have identical uses. It doesn't behave the same. One of the concepts we use with pulling soil samples is to pull a different soil sample from each of what we call a management zone. Now, there's two main ways of looking at management zones. One would be if we have a different use. For example, if I'm using one area of my property for a vegetable garden, I might want to call that a management zone, take separate soil samples in that area. I'm managing it differently, applying different fertilizers, different crops. Maybe I have a landscape bed or beds. Maybe I want to call that another management zone. And then my turf would be a third management zone. So that would be one way of looking at a management zone. We actually manage the area differently. The other way of looking at management zones is our property, even though we're using it for the same purpose, behaves differently. Many people will have, and again, I'll use lawn as an example. Many people will have turf where one area grows great, it doesn't have many weeds, it responds real well to fertility, But they may have another area where it just doesn't. It's sparse, it's thin, it's weedy, it just doesn't do well. Maybe you have an area that's poorly drained. Again, it behaves differently. So what we might want to do is divide those into management zones and take and submit a separate soil sample into the lab for each of those zones. Now I've drawn up a little picture that I hope shows up to illustrate this in my own home. Now, a couple of things I want to point out before I show this image, and I may try to post this on YouTube just so people have it to be able to refer to once I put this up. I built my house in 2015. Okay, as with most new construction, the first thing they did was bring out an excavator, and the first thing the excavator did was dig a hole. Now, if we think of the excavator scoop as it starts scooping up the soil, the first few scoops are towards the top of the soil surface, so it's pulling off topsoil. So it takes it, scoops it up, deposits it, right? And it deposits it in a pile. As the excavator goes deeper and deeper, it gets into subsoil. Well, it just deposits that on top of the topsoil. So we're left with a situation where our subsoil is actually on top of our topsoil. Not an ideal situation. And then, of course, once the home's constructed and you go back to grading out the property, you don't take an excavator out and re-excavate. What you do is you take in a bulldozer or something and you grade it back in. So in my home, I have a section of property right around the house that is subsoil. This is very common in urban, what we call urban soils. It's very common in new subdivisions, new construction, whether it's residential or commercial property. And it's something we have to deal with. And we have to, so I have that as a separate management zone. Now, one of the nice things about my property is it's 600 feet off the road. So when they started putting in the base for the driveway, they first scraped off about the top foot or so of topsoil to be able to put that base in. And then they piled that off and kind of off to the side. So I have this pile of topsoil sitting off to the side once the house was put in, and I had enough to put about 2 foot of that on my front yard. So I'm calling my front yard, where I have 2 foot of topsoil that I was able to put on, a separate management zone from this other area of subsoil around the other 3/4 of my house. The other thing is my yard that I decided to, for now at least, make a yard is larger than the footprint of the house. That is native Indiana soil. It used to be horse pasture. So that is a third management zone. So what I end up with is 3 management zones. I have my improved topsoil in the front yard. I have my subsoil around the other 3/4 of the house. Then around the perimeter, I have my native Indiana soils. So I'm going to pull a separate soil sample for each of those. I'm going to try to just show this image, but I may have to post it on YouTube because it's a little bit hard to decipher here. You will see I have a septic drain field up here. I have a line drawn through it. I'm not doing anything with that. I think in rural areas of Indiana, most of our septic fields need a perimeter drain. It's a very dry area of the property, and it's very hard to manage. You can fertilize it, certainly. You want to make sure it gets water because, again, the water table is artificially lowered. But in my case, I kind of like it being a little bit low fertility because if there's ever a problem with my drain field, bright green will be a sign that there's some fertilizer come to the top, which is something I don't want. I also have this area here. I have a pole barn right here. This area here is mowed like a lawn, but I drive tractors over it and equipment and kinds of stuff, and you know, I'm just not doing anything with it. Now the rest of this, I have zone 1, which is right here. This is the front of the house, okay, and that has my topsoil. Zone 2, in orange, if it shows up, okay, in orange. Zone 2 is my subsoil, and then around the perimeter, I have my native Indiana soil. And now we get into where a lot of confusion results because of terminology. We hear the term soil sample, right? And I think this is a extremely understandable error people make. I would make it if I didn't know, didn't have some education on it. We think of taking a soil sample, we think of just one dollop of dirt, right? Of soil. We just think of one item. That's actually not true. Each soil sample should consist of 10 to 15 cores, distributed somewhat uniformly throughout your management zone. The reason for this is fairly simple. If I just take one core from my soil sample, where I take that sample from, it's very hard to say if that will be representative of the entire area. Maybe I have a dog. It may be in an area where the dog has gone to the bathroom in the last month. It's going to show a lot more fertility than the rest of the property. So again, I want to take 10, 15 samples so I can kind of average that out and I can have a more representative sample. But again, I don't know why agronomists use this term. I mean, they call it a soil sample, but a soil sample actually consists of 10 to 15 cores. Now, the way you want to do this is you want to think of your area if it's at least somewhat rectangular. And what we usually recommend is that people chart out either an M or a Z pattern, and that they actually take samples at periodic intervals along the M or the Z. I'm not sure how well this will show up on camera, but I did do this for my zone A, which is what I intend to sample today. And I put flags down, so hopefully I can show. See, I have flags there. I have flags around over there. I can't really see what I'm doing with my iPad. I have flags out farther in the property. And what I've tried to do, again, is put flags periodically throughout the area that I want to sample. So I've already taken the soil samples from the other areas, and I am going to just quickly demonstrate how to take one soil sample from the area directly in front of me. Now, I'm going to show two different methods of doing that. One of these is using a soil probe. Okay, I have a soil probe in the extension office. It is actually available for people to sign out if they want to use it. Obviously, it's a great tool, but it's, this particular probe is probably about a $200 tool, and you may not have that. So the other thing I'm going to do is show a slice method. If I have my soil probe now, when we take soil samples for turf, we want about the top 6 to 8 inches. So the nice thing about this is I can usually just use my body weight with the probe and pull a soil sample. So what I have here then is a soil sample. Okay. Now, one of the things we want to do is we want to remove all of this top stuff. We want to get rid of the actual vegetative material. We want to remove root systems. We don't want to sample that. We want to just sample the soil. This organic matter can really skew our soil sample. Let me show you, if I can again, get my camera correct, be able to show you. You will see that I have already sampled the other areas. So what I'm going to do now is just deposit this into my sampling bucket. And there I have my soil sample. So or my core, excuse me. So again, I'm going to pull some of this off because that's roots. And again, so it comprises my core, and I would take about a dozen of these once I clear off all of that root system, because I don't want to be sampling the root system. Just for kicks, and I guess for the exercise, because it was pretty stiff, I went ahead and pulled one soil sample from this clay area. And I think if you look at this is it. If you notice the smearing on the sides of it, this is from my management zone 2 that is unimproved. If we handled that, it's a little dry now, so it will somewhat crumble, but if we handle that, it would turn into larger clods. Whereas if we handle this, it just crumbles up into a fine thing, where here we're into larger clods. It's just not breaking up real well. So it's a little different type of soil structure. I'm not sure if that showed up real well on film, but it's a very different type of soil structure than what I have here, where I've put together all of my soil. Okay, so once we have our soil in here, what we do is we then mix it all up, right? We just mix it all up. Got a rock in there, don't need that. I will still remove, like if I've got root system, there's some roots. I'll still remove this vegetative matter. I don't want to sample that. It's not soil. So if I have more of this in here, which I probably will, I'll scoop it out. But once I've mixed that all together, which I haven't done yet, but once I mix that all together, I will put it in a container and send it off to a soil testing lab. Okay, there is one other method called the slice method. And this makes me wish, it hasn't rained here in about 2 weeks, so this makes me wish I had actually done this a little while back. But a slice method involves using a shovel, since many people do not happen to have a soil probe. It takes a little more work, but it's also fairly easy to do. I will mention that if you happen to have something like this, which is called a drain spade, that makes life easier to do this. But you can do this perfectly well with a normal spade. And I'm going to step out here once I readjust my camera and try to demonstrate how to do this. Make sure I've got my... Okay, so the slice method works like this. We take our spade, or some people will call it the pie method. We take our spade, put it in the ground, again, to a depth of about 6 inches. Again, this is a little, if it's a little wetter, that would work a little bit better. Next thing we do is we wedge this forward, okay? And we create either what we call a pie or an area that we can slice. Then we go opposite the area where we just pushed, and we pull out a slice. And right here, we have our slice. Again, we would do the same thing. We would pull out the roots, we pull up the topsoil. We probably don't need quite as much as we have here, but this here can consist of a soil sample that we would send into a lab. Now here's the nice thing. Of course, I've got this kind of gash in my soil. All I have to do is this. Tamp it down. I know when I tell people about going out and they don't have a nice tool and about taking soil samples in the yards, I know they get worried about having 10 or 15 holes in the yards. By doing the slice method, by tamping the ground opposite the direction which you just pulled your sample from, you really can do this without too much damage to your soil. So that is it. That is how to take a soil sample. I'm actually a little warmer than I thought it was this morning. Apologize for sweating a little bit on camera. But this is how we take a soil sample. We just go around, we take, again, multiple cores, mix it up, and then what we need to do is send it into a certified soil testing lab. And Purdue does have a list of certified soil testing labs that we can send this into. I will be sending mine in once I pull the samples on the other 2 management areas. I'll be interested in the results. But again, that is all there is to taking a soil sample. It's not anything that should be intimidating. It's not anything that should be beyond the capacity of most homeowners. And it is an extremely useful management tool when we start looking at really any part of our landscape, or if you're a farmer, if it's pasture or hay or corn and soybeans. It's an essential part of fertility management, really in any type of crop production, including turf. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.